People who went to private school. What was the best rich kid meltdown you've ever witnessed? Story 1. This one girl would always show off the new things her parents got her, then pick and choose who to share it with like it was a privilege. This one time they got her these heart-shaped pastel-colored chocolates. She waited until someone noticed them, so she could tell the table about it, and then she took a bite. She immediately went to the bathroom and came back crying. It was soap. Story 2. Dude got gifted a new sports car from his dad. The dealership didn't have the color he wanted, so he had to wait 2 weeks. He threw a temper tantrum, screaming, cursing, and throwing things. Dead serious. Story 3. One had a meltdown because his grandma was hospitalized and he couldn't spend his holidays in his other house in Reunion Island. He went there every holiday. Story 4. I was the poor kid on scholarship, so most of my friends came from significantly wealthier families than mine. One of the richest kids was named Jesse, and he was famous for having tantrums where he'd cause damage or start unhinged fights with other kids over nothing. He didn't have any emotional issues or neurodivergence. He was just a spoiled dickhead. One day, we started a Jesse has a Wessie chant on the bus, and he went nuclear, like a trying to scratch kids' faces while screeching level tantrum. When he got off the bus, he ripped the side view mirror of a car off. Jesse, if you're out there, you have a giant Wessie. Story 5. I had an old friend who, when we were in college, invited me to sit in his box at an Alabama game. The night before, we went out to eat with a bunch of mutual friends, all from the tennis community. I was entertaining and everyone was having a good time, laughing and stuff. Not him. He sends me a text 2 hours after I left, saying I was no longer invited, after driving into town for the game. Why? His response, no one wants you there. Then he blocked me in every way. I'm gonna take a flying leap by no one. He meant himself. Story 6. I grew up in the late 90s, around the time the original Humvees became super popular. When I was 16, one of my classmates got a brand new one for his birthday. While showing off one Saturday afternoon, he drove it into a marsh. The marsh turned out to be deeper than he thought, and he had to bail out the driver's side window while it slowly sank into 7-ish feet of muck. I heard later that cleaning and restoring it would have cost more than the vehicle was worth, so it was written off. Upon returning to school, he got some well-deserved ribbing from his friends, threw a tantrum, and stormed out of the lunchroom. There wasn't much schadenfreude to enjoy, though. A week later, the little rolls up in a brand new Viper. Story 7. Went to culinary school with a rich girl. We're joking on the train platform about to head to her place, and she leaves her designer purse on the platform with her phone, wallet, and translator foreign student stuff. I'm sitting there upset as because the bag was like $2,000, much less the important stuff inside. She's utterly unbothered, just cancels her credit and bank cards when she gets in. We're in class the next day, and despite less than 18 hours passing between losing her stuff and morning class, she has a new purse, wallet, phone, and 2 translators because one had a better microphone and one had Korean as the default setting. I never paid for her drinks again after that. Not the kid, but I've seen a HOF baseball player get kicked out of his son's middle school game because he didn't like that his kid struck out. Full blow up, got on the field yelling at the ump, embarrassed the out of his son. Plus the kid went down watching 3 straight strikes, so no idea what the dad was pissed about. The kid kinda sucked at baseball, really cool guy otherwise. Story 8. A rich kid I grew up with backed his Porsche onto a Honda Civic and just walked away from it. He was just being a POS. Not even kidding. A week later, he had a new Porsche. His dad has a garage full of them. Story 9. A senior once got wasted and somehow ended up driving his car through a wall into the dining hall. Parents stormed into the school the next day with a lawyer and tried spinning the story that the school's parking lot had too many turns on the roads, which is how his car ended up in the lunch line. Somehow this worked, and the entire parking lot was rebuilt, and the family donated a new dining hall that now has their name on it. Story 10. Kid got caught cheating and went to lawyer daddy to plead their case that they were just being efficient and using their resources. It halfway worked. They weren't kicked out but did have to take a 0. Incidentally, the school received a nice donation at auction from the family. Story 11. When I was in HS, someone arranged for thousands of rose petals to be laid out on the school lawn, spelling this girl's name to ask her out to prom. This was while a plane flew overhead, towing one of those banners asking the question. He got rejected and freaked the out. Parents were beefing with one another. People were telling the girl to just go with him since his family spent so much money. He was clowned on relentlessly. It was pretty hilarious. Story 12. Tie between. In junior high, we all had to wear uniforms. We hated them, but everyone had to do it. Unless you were Greg, who would wear a fake military uniform to school. His parents made it and put his dad's patches on it. Despite being a preteen, Greg had the "you're disrespecting the US Army" attitude and would bully people to show how tough he was. One day, someone stole one of the patches off his uniform, and he sat down on the ground crying in the middle of the classroom. It was so bad, the teacher made everyone stop what they were doing and open up all their desks to prove they didn't steal it. It was returned to him by the end of the day. Also, Greg would brag about the combat his dad would go into. His dad was National Guard a kid, bragged for weeks about his Florida trip over spring break. He comes back with so much self. Tanner, it looked like blackface. Dude was Irish and was mocked relentlessly. Story 13. Not a student, but I tutored a lot of rich high school kids. My very first and worst student was ridiculously spoiled. He never did any of the practice tests I gave him, not even once. And our sessions were just me talking and him saying, I have no idea with his arms folded. One time, I guess he had an injured foot. We were upstairs and he went to ask their housekeeper for a bottle of water. I heard this from the other room. Kid, can you just throw it? My foot. Housekeeper. Why do you treat me like, when your friends are here, all the time, you treat me like. Kid, whoa! I just asked for a bottle of water. Housekeeper, I'm so sick of it. He came back in and was like, she yelled at me. And I just pretended I didn't hear any of it. Now, on its own, it totally sounds like the kid didn't do anything wrong, and I suppose that's true. But with this kid, I'm certain it was just the end of her rope. Not me, but a friend was part of a bridal party from a friend of hers at college. The bride who had rich parents said, oh, let's just all chip in and hire a private jet to take us to Cancun for the bridal shower. Private jets cost like $2,000 per hour on the cheap end. Even split between 5 people, that's $400 an hour, which is crazy. All the bridesmaids except one literally said, we love you, but we can't do that. We'll meet you there after flying ourselves. The bride was obviously pissed and ghosted them for a week before replying back something along the lines of, it's whatever, and moved the bridal shower to a different area that was in the US for cheaper accommodations, and for everyone to fly there easier. My friend suspects it's due to the maid of honor being her best friend and not crazy spoiled being able to talk some sense into her. Story 14. I was from an underprivileged family. Wealthy families in my area always had English fluent nannies and private tutors, which taught their kids. I had neither. There was this rich girl, Sarah, in my class, who was always top of school in English and always represented the school in competitions. Growing up, I consumed lots of English media, which made me fluent when I was young, not so much now. When we got back our reports, I got the highest mark in English, which made me gain more recognition from my teachers. This made her go furious. Her mom went as far as bribing teachers with gold to lower my marks and increase hers, which they actually did. BTW. There was this big assembly that was held outside our city. Sarah said it was her dream to go. She was obviously chosen to represent our school. During practice, Sarah was absent, so I substituted her. She was absent for almost whole week because of her brother's graduation abroad. During the assembly day, I was chosen to represent our school, since Sarah skipped practice and wasn't ready enough. She didn't know this, so when she came to the assembly, flashy clothes and everything, ready to read the speech, our principal told her that she had been substituted by me. I remember her screaming, kicking, and crying. Teachers obviously backed Sarah. I was 10 back then, so I started crying from the insults I was getting. Principal insisted that I am going to represent our school. After the semester, I left the school, but at least she never got to be the school representative XD. Story 15. My daughter was in first grade, and this affluent child had a complete meltdown because they were going to take a motor coach bus to a museum 3 hours away. She screamed over and over that only trashy poor people ride buses. Her parents, of course, drove her. Story 16. Dad was a teacher with 6 kids. Grandparents funded me to go to private school. I rode my bike while my classmates were chauffeured or drove their new sports cars or fancy Jeeps. It was the 70s. My bike got vandalized regularly. I started putting gear grease in the A-reader valves for the jerks who like to let the air out of my tires. Ruined fancy clothes? Yes, sir. And a few winter's days I cross-country skied to school. They all freaked out. The school staff were all rather pleased. They were monks, with a vow of poverty. Story 17. While I didn't go to private school, I worked with teenagers who went to the most expensive one in East Memphis, and it wasn't close. We were going for a retreat camp one week, and this middle schooler was screaming at his mom in the parking lot because she wouldn't give him enough money. He kept saying, you don't love me? You know I need more than this. How am I supposed to have fun? Blah, blah, blah. Truly remarkable. I was an intern at the time and was blown away by the scene, but everyone else seemed to either be used to this nonsense from this kid, or agreed, or didn't care. The issue, his mom only gave him $500 cash, and he wanted $1,000 for an 8th grader at a week-long camp in the mountains of TN. You'll never forget that one. I don't know what little brain is doing nowadays, but I hope it's not still yelling at his mom for money. Story 18. Had a golden child and scapegoat in the same private school. 2 years apart. The parents gave the golden child everything, and the scapegoat only got shabby hand-me-downs, including school supplies. Well, the golden child freaked out and bit a teacher because he gave her an A- instead of an A on an essay. This was 8th grade. Once she calmed down, she looked at her sister and said, you don't understand. If I'm not perfect for them, they're going to treat me like they already treat you. Story 19. Not a meltdown, but when I used to work at Starbucks at a very wealthy area, $8 million homes, I had this super rude customer, and she was always very degrading the way she spoke. One day, I decided to strike a conversation with her, since I see her every day. I told her she had a new car, but I remember her driving a different car the day before. Her reply, ugh, yuck. I would never drive the same car twice. Last time I ever spoke to her. Edit meant to say $8 million, not figures. Story 20. I wouldn't call it a meltdown, but definitely a rich kid thing. I overheard a girl in the dean's office complaining about her grandparents. It's been many years, so I'll get it as close as I can remember. God, my grandparents are so annoying wanting to be involved in our lives. If brother's name and I said we were into RVs, there would be 2 brand new RVs in our driveway the next day. I come from a well-to-do family, but I was also raised to appreciate the value of things. And I just shook my head. Like you, poor thing. Your grandparents want to be in your life and obviously have money to buy you whatever you want. However will you survive? Story 21. Ooh, I got one for this. You'll call her Sarah, even though that's not her real name. On her 16th birthday, her parents bought her a brand new car and brought it to the school parking lot to surprise her with it after school. Now the bell rings, and everybody makes our way towards the parking lot, so this is in front of the whole school. She has an absolute screaming meltdown that the car was not purple. Again, brand new car. Now, it wasn't like a Mercedes or something, it was just sort of a regular car, but a brand new car. 100 hers, the day she turned 16, and she loses her mind in front of the whole school screaming at her parents about how useless they are because the color of the car was not purple. This happened literally 30 years ago, and I still think about it like once a month. When I was 17, my dad was wonderful enough to buy me a 15-year-old Ford Probe that was falling apart, and I was enormously grateful. I cannot even imagine the level of entitlement it takes to have this kind of reaction to your parents gifting you an absolutely brand new car on your 16th birthday. Story 22. I went to a private boarding school in Massachusetts. There were lots of rich kids. I was there on financial aid. For some reason, the rich kids were really hung up on the idea that they were poor. A group of boys was discussing whose family was the least rich. The conversation went like this. Well, my family only really owns 2 houses. Our ski lodge is technically a condo. Well, we have the apartment in Manhattan, the loft in Brooklyn, and then a beach house in Montauk. So that's like only 1 house. Story 23. Not private school. In high school, son of rich sports agent was real obnoxious surprise and picked on those weaker surprise than he. Outside of class one day, he had backed up a girl who had to use a sit-down scooter to get around and lift her from wheel of the ground. I immediately physically confronted him and he lowered the scooter. We both got suspended. My dad said, well, you did it. His dad got him out of the suspension. From that day on, I learned the rich play by different rules. He has since passed away from diabetes as he never matured enough to manage it. Good riddance. Story 24. In a high school science class talking about satellites, and this kid in my class raised his hand and asked how airplanes avoid hitting the extension cords. We all laughed. The teacher was dumbfounded, of course. Kid threw his book at the teacher, broke a window with his fist, then left school. Story 25. I tricked a frat into letting my ska band play their house as our final show by saying we were a cover band, and they thought having us would attract a bunch of girls to come through so they could hook up. Nope. Packed it with like 300 people across campus who were just interested in us playing and having fun. I still remember seeing all the brothers basically standing in a line at the back fuming after our first song when they realized what they were in for. They ended up turning the power off on us near the end of our set, and that was that LMAO. Still one of my favorite memories. Story 26. I had a friend in college from a very wealthy county in Southern California, US. She straight up grew up on the beach. While in the laundromat, she was complaining to another friend and me about a surprise care package her mom mailed her. One of the items was a custom pair of Tom's shoes. They were adorable. It was extremely thoughtful of her mom to send them in the first place. She even chose the pattern and colors. My friend was furious and claimed that they were ugly. She said that she wrote a scathing note on the package and sent them back to her mom. The other friend and I were in shock and didn't even respond. We couldn't believe that she did this and actually told us about it, as if what she did was a good thing. Story 27. I have a bit of a reverse version of this. My family were the poorest people at our private school, I know. A bit ironic. But Dad worked his off and we lived threadbare because he believed education was so important. In 6th grade, I remember we had an emergency because the school I was attending for the first time had a very specific dress code that forbade any jackets or sweatshirts that weren't school branded. What that usually meant was that families could purchase a nice, one-color hoodie with the logo embroidered on it. All for a cool $60 each. This was back in 2000, so $112 with inflation today. For most families, it was as easy as ordering 3 and forgetting it. But for us, it was a very deep cut into our tight budget, but necessary as it get a bit cold out here in the SW. I remember the absolute stress the new 3 weeks were for the family as we recovered from it. But most importantly, both my parents really focused in on please, do everything you can to take care of this and keep it nice. Well, about 2 weeks after I got it, The class bully decided I was on the docket for harassment. I had spent the entirety of my school life getting bullied. Some my fault, most not. But my dad always reminded me I shouldn't sink to their level and to take the high road. Essentially, I was the way too tall for this grade pushover. Anyways, Travis came running out to the field we all had lunch in and started in on me, calling me names, throwing little rocks, and I took Dad's advice, turned the other way, and started walking. Travis didn't like that. I felt my neck get tight, like I was being choked, and then felt a sharp tug, followed by the sound of the hood ripping clean off the new hoodie they bought me. I felt that breeze hit between my shoulder blades, and for the first time in my entire life, I saw red. I swung around and punched him so directly square in the face, his feet lifted off the ground as his head carried him backwards a few feet. And that's the story of how I punched my bully so hard, he couldn't look me in the eye for the next 2 years before I ended up leaving that school. Story 28. My daughter is currently at private school, and I witness 3 affluent children in conniptions and paroxysms of tantrums over labubus every day. The children are given them every day by their parents, and they wear them on their ostentatious bags. Yes, children between the ages of 5 to 11 all have designer backpacks and satchels. Story 29. Wife taught at one for a long time. A lot of stories, but my favorite was the girl who wouldn't be seen with the same purse 2 periods in a row and had a meltdown when she couldn't get to her locker between periods to switch out. Story 30. I got a scholarship to a private high school. A kid from a famous car racing family told me, voluntarily, suggesting she had no idea that she was being ridiculous, that she had screamed at her parents and told them they obviously didn't love her, because they bought her a drum kit for her birthday that was only $4,999, not even $5,000. She was 13 or 14. I think I was supposed to sympathize with her. Story 31. A couple from a boarding school in the UK in the 1980s. 1. Kid in the cadet force took the .22 rifle he was allowed to keep in his room and started taking pot shots at the younger kids. Hit several. The school kept it under wraps, but the cadet force were disbanded. 2. Kid added sugar in the petrol tank of a bunch of parents' cars on an open day. Parents paid to smooth things over. Eventually, he got expelled. However, they kept him locked away from the rest of us on the last night. He claimed it was because the school were afraid of what he would do. Really, it was because the school were aware there were packs of people looking to teach him a lesson. Edit general opinion in replies seems to be that it can't have been a .22, given I know all about firearms and am calling on a memory from other 4 decades ago. I guess as a child I was either mistaken or misinformed. Story 32. 2 of the kids at my school got into a fight over a parking place, and one somehow drove his super lifted truck over the hood of the other kid's sports car. Fortunately, both of their parents bought them new vehicles, so nobody learned any lessons. Story 33. Emphasis on rich kid meltdown and not wealthy kid meltdown. I went to a boarding school. Some kids were publicly funded and many were privately funded. Because of this, you had a lot of kids from various backgrounds. Despite it being a private school, some of my classmates and dorm mates represented some pretty serious wealth. One of my friends was Disney's granddaughter. She never even said a word about that until junior year. A couple classmates were young Rockefellers. You never heard from them. They were cool and had no drama. You really only heard from the rich kids who were trying to make everyone think they were wealthy. Story 34. A kid I taught missed a couple of days of school right before a big test. She and her family took time off to fly to New York to see the US Open. She came back, took the test, and did badly. Her parents blamed me for not giving her a couple hours of my unpaid after-school time for special review. Job with entitled people. Kid got caught pills his junior year. Decided to name every person he sold to in an attempt to not be in trouble. Gave over 100 names. Like 5 kids showed up to his grad party the next. He ended up trying to crash a few of other people's showing up drunk and yelling. Ended up going to jail for like 6 months. Story 35. The daughter of the couple that owned several businesses was salty because she got a B on a homework assignment. Our teacher refused to speak to students on the day assignments and tests were handed back to allow tempers calm down. The day after she received the grade, she threatened his life and said parents were powerful enough that nobody would ever find his body. Seemed a bit much even in 11th grade. Story 36. I didn't go to private school, but I played baseball for a public school. And when we beat our division rival, a private school, they lost it. This school is a storied program with coach who's won over 700 HS games. They recruit from all over multiple counties, but then play in a public division with 5 other public schools. Of course, they win a ton. We're usually outmatched. My junior year, we are good, really good. Won a state championship, but 3 guys from our town played for the rival school, so it was extra special for us to get them this year since these guys should be plying for us. We end up winning our first game against them 10-2. Crushed them. 4 home runs in the first 2 innings. They lost there, as we're on the bus, and they're walking by some talking starts. One of their guys pulls a bat out of his bag like he's threatening us. Another takes out 2 baseballs and proceeds to whip them at our bus. Second ball broke a window. Dude takes his bat and just starts going to town on the ground and small trees next to him. He was still jumping around like a lunatic as our bus pulled out. Dude couldn't handle losing a baseball game. Not to us at least. Story 37. Little girl who could not let anyone have something more interesting than she did. She would always borrow without asking items that were pink. One time we were on the bus, and she had taken from a teacher out of her purse. A pink spray teacher rode public transportation to work very early in the morning. She sprayed it on her neck thinking it was perfume. It was in fact pepper spray. She screamed for the 20 minutes to her stop. Her mom flipped out and screamed, "Someone injured my princess." They tried to get the amazing teacher fired. Didn't work. Story 38. My wife and kids witnessed this one. We were living in Switzerland on an expat assignment, and my kids got to attend a very exclusive boarding school as day students. There were some very wealthy families there, and the after-school pickup time was like a fancy car show. One day, my wife was waiting by our Opel Zafira van with two of our kids while waiting for the others. One of the extremely spoiled kids walked by and exclaimed, "Not the Porsche again," when he saw what the family driver had brought to pick him up in. It was a great example for my kids. They couldn't believe it. Edit slight edit for capitalization. Story 39. Private Christian school but didn't have uniforms. Just a really strict dress code. If you were out of dress code, you had to go to the office and you'd be put in something random they snagged from Goodwill. Girl had a complete hysterical crying meltdown that she, having showed up to school in a very disallowed spaghetti strap tank top, was given a sweater to wear. The fact that it being thrifted meant someone had worn it before her was deeply disturbing to her. Meanwhile, my broke went to Goodwill as a treat. Story 40. I went to a private school where most kids drove better cars than our teachers. Once, during a school trip, this rich kid completely lost it because the hotel room didn't have a sea view in a hill station. He actually screamed, "My dad pays more in taxes than this entire hotel is worth," and called his driver to come get him from another city. He sulked the entire trip, refused to eat the buffet food, and kept asking for imported water. The cherry on top? When we returned, his parents actually complained to the school that their child had been emotionally disturbed by poor planning. Story 41. I knew a girl who by age 16 had totaled 2 brand new cars. When her parents refused to buy her a new one and told her to get a job if she wanted a car, she threw a massive fit and complained about how dare they make her walk to school. I remember just staring at her and laughing as she complained. It made her so mad, but I thought it was hilarious. Story 42. I went to the international high school. It was weird. My family was broke, but my tuition was covered by my dad's work. It was the only US accredited high school in the country, so us poors walked the halls with people that were driven to school in Bentleys. One rich got in a fight with another kid and got his beat in front of everyone. I'll never forget him on the ground screaming, "Just wait! My bodyguard is gonna kick your." Story 43. I played competitive cricket on Saturdays with about 6 guys from school, a fairly middle-of-the-road private school. The other 7 came from a neighboring private school, and these fellas were completely loaded. The coach's son, Josh, was pretty well used to getting whatever he wanted. His dad bought him a brand new gaming PC, though this was in 2005, so not what we're used to seeing today. However, his dad told him he needed to save for the monitor. Of course, Josh thought his dad would cave and buy him one. We're at cricket training, and there's a very heated argument between Josh and his dad about getting a monitor on the way home. Josh absolutely loses his UR, screaming at his dad. He then picks up a cricket ball and whips it straight at his dad's head. Josh is 17 at this point and has an arm, and for anyone who handheld a cricket ball, they're a lot heavier and harder than a baseball. Josh's dad spent 4 days in hospital, and Josh never got to use his brand new high-end gaming PC. Story 44. Not private school, but I went to school with some super rich kids, and one kid made her parents return the brand new car they bought for her because it A was a Toyota and B didn't have leather interior. Story 45. Don't attend them. I work in them. 5-year-old gets in trouble with the teacher for not listening to instructions. Keeps getting into trouble. Gets sent to the head, really just the head of pre-prep, but same thing. Head asks, "Why are you not doing what your teachers are telling you to do?" 5-year-old, "I don't take orders from the help." Walks off once, had a parent phone up to say they couldn't come in today because the Porsche is stuck behind the automated gates at their house. And some year 8s once decided to collectively smash their school iPads, which their parents had paid for and they'd been using for a couple of years on their last day of prep school. They played frisbee with them, jumped up and down on them, and left the remains in a hedge. When they were discovered and brought to account for their actions, one of them said, "But I have 5 iPads at home. What do I want another one for?" Story 46. A guy at my school was always speeding on campus with his expensive cars. One day he ran over a student, had her full tuition paid, medical bills, extra, and his parents took away his cars and gave him an old Honda. His GF was furious because she was embarrassed by his new car and they broke up. After, it became a school joke to cross in front of the rich kids driving to get our tuition paid. Story 47. Kid was told by his parents that if he hit an over-the-fence home run, that they would buy him a new Jeep. He hits what looks to be a homer, and the outfielder threw his glove up in the air in left field and actually hit the ball. It was hilarious, and the kid crashed out. They still bought him the Jeep though. Story 48. I once watched a 14-year-old girl scream and hit her father repeatedly over the head with a ridiculous yellow purse because it wasn't the right one. This was in front of the school when he came to pick her up in a chauffeured car. Driver opened his door. He stepped out to greet her. She started swinging. Monday, she had a beigey pink purse. This is also the girl who broke up with her because he didn't get her a 3-month present, loudly, and with jazz hands fanfare and a slap to the face. He cried. She had a new in a day who lasted 5 months. And yet, she was beautiful and wealthy and never saw a consequence of a single action. She is now married to a wealthy guy 30 years older and is probably just as blissfully terrible to her husband and kids. I had one interaction with her. I was changing in the locker room and she told me my shorts looked old. I said, "They are." And she kept going. After I thought it was a lucky thing that hadn't led to her a growing in me. Story 49. Meltdown kind of implies that they may be throwing a fit or tantrum. The wildest one I saw wasn't exactly that, but definitely a meltdown in some regard. Not a long story, but basically this poor kid who was just a normal dude had undiagnosed schizophrenia at the time, and he thought bees were inside his clothes. So in front of everyone, he just started freaking out and tore his clothes off down to his underwear. He ended up getting really good help and is doing well. His mom was a teacher at the school too, and she was there when it happened. She was pretty embarrassed, but I remember our teachers talking to us about it before he came back. Story 50. Had a guy in his junior year trade the new Monte Carlo SS. Yes, it was the 80s his grandmother gave him for a BMW. He made a point of parking it away from everyone else in the school parking lot because he said we all had crappy cars and wouldn't understand how to be safe around a luxury vehicle. One day while he was at tennis practice, we all parked our cars around his car in the lot and left the area. Got called to the principal's office the next day, and we all got detentions after his daddy called and complained that we were risking damage to his son's new BMW by parking our clunkers near him. Story 51. This was at university in Canada where one student, an international student from the Middle East, would always have the latest fashions, fancy gadgets, always done up hair and makeup, clearly came from a lot of money. She lived in the fancier dorm for my school, which was slightly farther across the very large campus from where our classes typically were. When she found out, she was very displeased, and her solution was to take a taxi like 2 blocks to get to class every day, so she could sleep 15 more minutes. Story 52. To begin with, this was a very fundamentalist Christian church school. They were having a big church-type prayer meeting at school, and they started talking about the gays. One of the kids who was there, probably because his parents wanted to pray the gay away, got really emotional and started crying and ran out of the building and never came back. We were told he had chemical imbalances. Story 53. I've seen so many. I went to a girls-only private school on scholarship for some time, but the one that really takes the cake was Racket Girl. During PE one day, she couldn't get a hold of her favorite tennis racket, so went into an utterly mental meltdown in the PE hall. Another classmate who was unfortunate enough to be using her racket became the object of her anger, and this girl pounced on and floored her. She grabbed the girl's head and pounded it into the floor before the teacher removed her. The injured girl had foamy blood come out of her nose and mouth and went into a convulsing fit. She had to be airlifted to hospital, and I never found out if she was okay or if anything happened to her because she didn't ever come back. Racket Girl was nonplussed about what she had done, rationalized it away as, well, she shouldn't have been using my racket, and she wasn't punished because of who Daddy Dearest was. She'll be almost 30 now, and you'll be genuinely surprised if she hasn't outright killed someone due to her anger issues and how little she cares for others. Story 54. Went to school with an obscenely wealthy Iraqi girl. She wasn't very adept in social skills and basically did grand gestures to make friends, buying expensive jewelry for people, bringing the whole year to McDonald's every Friday. For Christmas, she wanted to bring a dozen other girls to New York. We're in Europe on a private jet. Most of the girls weren't allowed go, and she lost her in the hallway over how she had it all organized. They got like 2 weeks notice of this plan. Anyway, I think like 5 people actually went, and it sounded like a great time. I did feel for that girl. Sure, she was obscenely wealthy, but she didn't really have any friends, and people only hung out with her to get free.